Welcome back to the Savage Nation. One of the people in the Senate who I've always respected, remember I've always said there are only a very few who I've looked up to. He joins us right now. He doesn't need an introduction. He's been fighting the fight for a very long time. His name is Senator Jim DeMint. And believe me, it's an honor for me to have Senator Jim DeMint from South Carolina on the Savage Nation. Senator, welcome to the program. It's a real honor.
Well, Michael, it's more of an honor for me. I couldn't be doing what I'm doing if it weren't for you and folks like you who are getting the word out all over the country. But it looks like we're making a lot of progress.
It does. But, Senator, for many years you were a man, a voice in the wilderness. People marginalized you. They said, well, it's a small minority of the far right. I've heard it all because it's been said about me as well. But it seems that that's no longer true, doesn't it?
Well, it looks like the power has shifted outside of Washington, where I was being abused, to the people. And as I travel around the country now, people are informed and engaged. They're ready to take back their country. They're not going to take it anymore. They know it doesn't make any sense to keep spending when you're already bankrupt as a nation. There's a real unity in our country today against what's going on in Washington. So I think if Republicans want to embrace a big tent, it's out there right now, and more, particularly our candidates who are challenging this time, are standing with the American people rather than the Washington establishment.
Now, you are a member of the old guard in some ways, but you were recently ranked as the Senate's most conservative member by National Journal and the number one senator voting for responsible tax and spending policies by the National Taxpayers Union. That says a lot. But today was a big day in the Senate, wasn't it, Senator? The DREAM Act and the attempt to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell were both stopped in the Senate today. Do you feel this is a turning point for the November elections?
Well, it is, but it's also a good indication of what the power of the people can do. Every member of the Senate, particularly the Republicans, realize America is looking in on what we're doing. And so there's an accountability here that we haven't had before. And I'm not really part of the old guard in that this is my first term in the Senate. I will finish my 6 years this time, and so I'm not considered part of the power structure here. And actually, that's why I'm so offensive to a lot of people. Freshmen are supposed to stay in the back row and not be heard. But I'm tired of what's happening to our country, and fortunately, there are millions of Americans who feel the same way.
Were you in politics prior to joining the Senate, Senator DeMint?
I was in the House for 6 years, and before that I had my own business for 15 or 20 years.
Incredible. Well, I want to ask a question about November. I mean, you're closer to it than I am. I think I have a fairly good stethoscope on the heartbeat of America, and I would think that there certainly will be a turnaround to a certain extent, but I'm not so sure that the route will be as complete as some are predicting. Do you have any feeling for that?
I really don't know. I think if the energy that's out there in America now continues to November the 2nd, if all of the activists, the grassroots folks who've been working actually run through the finish line, I think you'll see a big revolution here in Washington as far as a turnover of people. But it really depends on the people, not so much about us. And I don't think the Republicans who are in charge now are being bold enough as far as the promises of what reforms that we will carry through. But I have seen a big change in the leadership in the House and the Senate and their willingness to stand against particularly the spending and the borrowing and the debt and the government takeovers. I think we're making some progress, and my hope is that those who said the Tea Party and the grassroots activism is just a flash in the pan will be proved wrong November the 2nd. And mostly, more than anything else, Michael, when I see conservatives win in the Northeast and in Washington State and Wisconsin and maybe even in California, I can go back to these people who've criticized me for years and say, listen, you were wrong. A strong, common-sense conservative can win in any state in this country.
Right, a strong, common-sense conservative, which leads us to the next stage, which is for me, a little bit more passionate in a way, Senator DeMint, and no offense meant. But what about issues that really matter on the social level? Why do we never hear anything about the social crisis that has engulfed America? There doesn't seem to be any discussion of it in the Senate.
Well, there's more than you think, and I think if this is presented to America in a way that they can see clearly, obviously, a lot of the growth in government has caused a social crisis. Our attempts to alleviate or eliminate poverty have ended up with a lot of government incentives for unwed births, and that has resulted in everything from juvenile delinquency to school dropouts. I made a point last week in the values conference that was here in Washington that you really can't be a fiscal conservative if you're not a social conservative, because the deterioration of our culture is costing our country hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions a year.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need the government to promote any religion. I'm not saying that, or even a particular morality. But the government has played a big role in actually purging values and principles from our society that make our society work. Even free enterprise does not work unless you have principled people involved with it. So
I hear you, but even the other day, the president spoke to the National Hispanic Caucus, and he quotes the Declaration of Independence, and he leaves out any reference to our Creator. I found that astounding. Has that gotten any buzz on the Senate floor?
Well, I think, I think we're all offended out here by this administration.
Oh, you are a diplomat, Senator.
Well, I don't expect it from the Obama administration or from the Democrats. Frankly, even though I have some friends on the Democrat side, they are so in bed with the labor bosses, the plaintiffs' attorneys, the George Soroses of the world. They can no longer function in any real world that I know here in America. The battle is now within the Republican Party of how many of us are going to embrace this newly found energy among the American people that wants us to return to a constitutional limited government. The president's trying to say these are radical ideas, but balancing your checkbook is not a radical idea, and that's the kind of thing we're talking about now. And as I said before, the good news is while we're polarized here in Washington, Americans are united around these limited government ideas. 40% of the people who come to Tea Parties are independents and Democrats, and there is a big tent out there if Republicans want to get in it.
Senator DeMint, before you go, about 6 months ago, people pressed me, and they heard me say there are only a few Republicans that I really could get behind, and I always mention Senator DeMint. We never met, and that's absolutely a fact. We've never corresponded. That's absolutely a fact. But I've always watched your policies and your politics, and they're most aligned with mine. And I said, when people said, well, who would you choose amongst the Republicans to run for the presidency? I said, Senator Jim DeMint. People thought I was nuts. Have you considered that? Would you consider that?
Well, Michael, I'm honored that you would say that, and it has come up. And it's not something that I want. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a Ronald Reagan or someone like a Winston Churchill. I see a regular guy, and I'm looking for someone out there who is maybe bigger than life, probably doesn't exist.
He doesn't. He doesn't exist. They're no longer around. But, Moses was a regular guy. He stuttered. He didn't want the job, and God said, no, I've chosen you. So it doesn't have to be somebody like Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments.
I know that, but I guess it's very presumptuous for anyone to think they're presidential material, and I don't want to start out that way. But believe me, though, Mike, if asked to do the job, I know what needs to be done, and I don't question my management and leadership skills. But I would like to see someone of the stature of a Ronald Reagan who is winsome, and maybe they're there, and I certainly want to look for them first before I start looking in the mirror.
I hear you, and that's very humble and very, very interesting. And Senator DeMint, I want to thank you. It has been a great honor for me, and I hope my audience as well, to have you right here on the Savage Nation. All I can say is God bless you, and we're all praying for you.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to all your listeners who are making a difference in the country today. The power is really in the hands of the American people now, and that's where I'm most comfortable.
Senator Jim DeMint, thank you again. Well, there you heard it. There you heard it on the Savage Nation. A man who I didn't just suddenly out of nowhere say I respect. I've told you this for a long time, and people said, oh, he can't win any. Don't you remember about 6-9 months ago I said Senator Jim DeMint, many of you never heard of him, because he had been marginalized and beaten up by the vermin in the media, just as they're doing to every other Tea Party candidate who wins. The salenterates continue to do it. The nematodes in the media continue to do it. The boll weevils, whichever way you want to put it. This is unbelievable to me. If you look at what the left wing does to decent people who run for office. In Florida, there's a great man named Alan West, a colonel from a combat veteran. He happens to be a black man. It's important you know that. And he's running against an East Coast weasel named Klein, a real left-wing apparatchik of the lowest order, this Klein. And West is a real dignified American hero. Do you know what Klein did to West in a campaign mailer? Do you know what that weasel from Brooklyn running in Florida did to West? The weasel released Alan West's Social Security number in a mailer, bringing a great threat to the Colonel West, to his wife and to his children. This shows you the kind of degeneracy that we can expect from the Democrats, whether it be a low-life party apparatchik like Klein in Florida or at the highest level. There's no bottom to how low they will go. And we need dignified people like Alan West in Florida. We need dignified senators like Senator DeMint, who, by the way, as I said to you a year ago, no one ever heard of him. And right now, just like the Tea Party, suddenly they're taking him seriously. The world is changing before your eyes. In some ways, we have the professor to thank for this. In some ways, it took the imposter to awaken the American people to the danger we are in. In some ways, we almost have to thank God for having given us George Soros' selected candidate, Barack Hussein Obama. I'll be right back.
Savage.